Started. I am Dr. Jenny Simon. I am the Director of Undergraduate Studies for the Communication Studies Department at UNCG. And the panel that you are seeing are students that submitted final research papers to CST 300 Communication Theory. And this course is designed to let students take a deep dive into a communication theory of their choice and apply it to something that they are interested in. And what I do then is at the end of the semester, when they turn all these in, I read them, I grade them, and the ones that stand out, I invite to submit to the Undergraduate Honors Symposium. So I would like to thank the Lloyd Honors College for letting us do this and for giving our students this opportunity. It's really awesome and exciting, and I know all these students here today are really excited to present. To begin, I am going to introduce our students and let you hear a little bit about them, and then they're going to be presenting. Our first student is Graziella. Graziella, how do you say your last name? I don't think I've ever said it right.
It's Bacha.
Bacha, okay, Graziella Bacha. She is a junior majoring in communication studies and minoring in women's and gender sexuality studies, and her presentation will pair theories and topics from both of those subjects. Kyla is a junior at UNCG in communication studies and religious studies. She is interested in how technology affects relationships and specializes in symbolic interactionism. She was invited to speak at TEDx UNCG in 2020 and presented research at North Carolina Honors Association Conference in 2019. And in her spare time, she enjoys exploring outdoors with her fiance, Josh. Ariana, our next presenter, actually graduated last December, and she shared with us that she is now going to be doing some digital marketing with Goodwill. So congratulations there. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies, and her specific area of interest is, as an undergraduate student, was interpersonal relationships. So that is what she is going to be focusing on. And Rachel Fox is a senior at UNCG, majoring again in communication studies and has a minor in history. Her specific areas of interest include topics of research within communication studies as it relates to gender. And David Wynn is our final presenter here today. David, will you give us your communication studies major as well? Do you have a minor?
I do not.
You do not. All right. So, and David is a great student. He's a wonderful guy to have in class. He's always sitting in the front row. And even though he always has a mask on, I can always tell he's smiling. So I love to have him in the front row. So with that, I am going to turn the presentation over to Graziella. And then just just so you know which order we're going to speak, I'm going to do Graziella, then David, then Kayla, then Ariana, and then Rachel. Okay? All right, Graziella, will you begin? And also, I forgot to mention this, when you have about 2 minutes left, I'll raise my finger, but my two, like I told you guys, but don't worry too much. Don't let the clock drive your presentation. Just tell us what you know, okay?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen and do that. Can you see? Okay. So the gender binary, or the idea that gender is categorized with two options, man and woman, or boy and girl, has been used historically to socially define humanity and to formulate gender norms. This binary is extremely present in media, and as gender norms are represented through the media, they create stricter and more oppressive realities where women are often represented through inaccurate, over-sexualized, or other harmful portrayals. Not only is this the case, but a vast array of women are underrepresented in media. Although we see these harmful misrepresentations in all media every day, very little studies and research has been done to examine the impacts. Women who are often underrepresented include women of color, plus-size women, women with disabilities, and any women who may be part of any other marginalized groups. As someone who identifies with Generation Z, often known for tech savviness and, well, using our cell phones, and more importantly, someone who identifies as a woman, I find the portrayal of women in media fascinating. A lot of media is targeted towards young women specifically, including different music, movies, and television shows. More relevantly though, and recently, Social media has taken the leads with apps such as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, encouraging young women to put their lives on center stage for anyone who chooses to view their content. This is paired with unattainable standards for beauty and life in general for these young women, and they are forced to adhere to something that I recognize as the acceptable women's checklist. This includes things such as what foods are acceptable to eat or even crave, what makeup, clothes, jewelry, hair products, and other beauty and fashion industry items are acceptable and should be obtained or desired by women, and in turn for this, what women should look like, how we should behave, and anything else that young women should either have or desire. These things are all ever changing, and with the fast-paced social reality that has been cultivated through heavy emphasis on social media, the checklist is changing faster than ever. These thoughts all led me to some questions. How are social media and consumer trends cultivating realities that are shaping the self-esteem of a generation of women? How conscious of these realities are these women? In order to address these, I chose to investigate more specifically what realities have been formed by examining research compiled on muted group and cultivation theories, and how these theories can be used to explain the phenomenon we are seeing where girls and our self-esteem are so deeply impacted by social media. Then I surveyed women between the ages of 19 and 25 to examine the personal impacts of social media and consumer trends. It is difficult to generalize what impact media will have on a group, especially one as broad as all young women. Muted group theory suggests that members of marginalized groups, and in this case, women specifically, often feel obliged to discount themselves due to previously created social realities. When these realities are permeated into daily life through social media, advertisements, television, music, and movies, self-esteem can take an even greater hit as the acceptable women's checklist is virtually inescapable in the day-to-day. Muted group theory additionally explains the potential results of these social realities, while cultivation theory explains in more detail how they may have been formed. Cultivation theory suggests that an avid consumption of media at increasing rates could result in the formulation of more realities that dictate more social rules for women or others to adhere to. While these things have been considered, there is still a lack of serious concrete research surrounding these ideas and topics. One of the very prevalent parts of the checklist is makeup. Makeup has evolved into a massive industry with arms to reach women through all forms of media, from television to movies to commercials, and certainly social media as well. One of the biggest ways we see this now is in makeup tutorials. Most creators of these tutorials have huge followings on YouTube and now TikTok as well, where a consumer could watch 30, 40, 50, or even more condensed tutorials in less than an hour. These standard for acceptable looks and products is ever changing, and even within the past 2 to 3 years has changed so much more quickly than trends typically would have prior to social media. Makeup tutorials contribute to these changes. The tutorials are often paired with editing and filters, which creates a reality that suggests that women actually look that way in real life, which further impacts the self-esteem of viewers, typically and especially young women. The reality causes young women to funnel money into the beauty industry, purchasing every it product that gives them longer lashes, more flawless skin, or whatever else a product may advertise. An increased desire to undergo cosmetic surgery is another impact of these ever-evolving beauty standards. Now, while the standards do change, one standard that has remained relevant throughout the years is thinness. When viewed through cultivation theory, the thin body standard is shown to create a social reality of a massively warped perception of who is worthy of respect and accolades and who is just generally accepted in society. This is shown through a positive correlation between thinness and popularity, success, and social status, and fatness with undesirability or failure. Media of all kinds reinforce this social reality, including but absolutely not limited to social media. Prior to the extreme relevancy of social media in our society, the pressures were there. We would go and see thin actresses and models called plus sized or told they are letting themselves go on commercials or the covers of magazines, for example. So we have all these requirements for what womanhood should be, and we have so many different women, almost none of which fit this impossible cookie cutter standard. How is the permeation of these ideals impacting women? How are young women perceiving, internalizing, and coping with the messages that are sent from all of this media, dictating what is acceptable and unacceptable and what they can and can't do? People, and in my personal observation, women particularly, use social media in order to assess and participate in trends. As people have continued to participate in social media, anything expressed by individual users and even companies or organizations through advertisements or posts of their own have become real, measurable realities. Because the seemingly abstract ideas that exist inside the media have become real, they now have real consequences. These consequences or results are what I aim to measure through surveying women between the ages of 19 and 25 about their media consumption habits. I formulated a survey which asked the following: their age, how many hours of TV they consumed per week, and how many hours of social media they consumed per day. I chose these scales of week and day due to the easy access to social media that someone may have on the day-to-day as opposed to television, and the likelihood that people are generally spending more time using social media apps than watching television every day. Then the women were presented with a series of statements to be responded to on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. Some of these questions I'm going to display here for you guys. I know it's a little wordy, so I'll let you guys have a moment to read those. So the results of these I found had some striking contradictions, but I will share some statistics from the responses before getting into that. Predominantly, the women who participated in the survey believe, according to their media consumption, that most women are thinner than them, more conventionally attractive than them, and have more fulfilling social lives than them. The surveyed women also in majority believe that both thin women and conventionally attractive women are on average happier than their socially presumed less attractive counterparts, with 53.6% and 57.2% agreeing with these statements respectively. They also believed that thin or conventionally attractive women have more fulfilling social lives than their counterparts, with an outstanding 89.3% of the women surveyed believing this. Overall, the surveyed women did not feel accurately represented in television at all, and they also did not feel that television advertisements were in any way relevant to their interests. It is important to note that most women surveyed reported consuming 2 to 4 hours of television a week, while the majority also reports consuming an average of 4 to 6 hours of social media a day. This is of pretty important relevance when considering the data through the lens of cultivation theory. Because the majority of these women spend approximately 20 to 30% of the average time that most people are even awake in the day on social media, a social reality is formed wherein they are more likely to believe that the other women they see on social media are living these much more interesting and wonderful lives than they are, since what they see is the most shining moments of every woman's life every single day. As stated previously, the results did also garner some interesting contradictions. The majority of women surveyed admitted to a desire to emulate the women they see on social media, while an even larger majority at 71.4% stated that they do not feel that other women are even honest on their social media, while also reporting to be about 50-50 on whether their personal social media accounts are honest as well. So women are aware of the inaccuracies on social media, yet we're still wired to strive to attain the unattainable. This analysis examined how women compare themselves to social media posts from individuals and how they react to advertisements from organizations and companies. It is also notable to consider that there are many other elements with which people can find themselves in self-comparison, such as cartoons or increasingly relevantly celebrities. With the constant easy accessibility to the lives of others, we are cultivating a social reality in which people are constantly questioning themselves. Because the survey also has some relatively personal parts, I wanted to provide an option to include any comments or anecdotes for anyone that decided to take the survey. One response in particular did stand out to me while I was reading the results, and I will display that for you all now. Quote, "I think algorithms have completely shifted media consumption. I now mainly see things that I also am. It is still obvious that the bigger media platforms, especially television, are way behind on true representation of different women and on literally even how they portray connections between people. And I think I, as the woman and person that I am, will indefinitely compare myself even if I do see myself. So answering these questions can be difficult." I wanted to include this because it does tie in well with cultivation theory in that it shows that women who do not fit the standards are more likely to obsessively attempt to adhere to them. But the statement also provides a truly personal insight that resonated with me and may resonate with anyone else who struggles with balancing themselves and the ever-shifting beauty standard social reality around them. As a closing note, I do wish to touch on how this critique of media in general does encapsulate the themes of muted group theory well. It is difficult to explore social realities that impact women without including how the ideas and feelings of women are quite often discounted and disadvantaged. Thank you for your time.
Sorry, I hit my mouse and all of a sudden everybody went away. Thank you so much. Excellent work. I loved reading your paper at the time, and I think this is such a great topic. You did a wonderful job presenting, and I hope you continue with this. So great work. I want to present our next speaker, who is David Wynn. And David Wynn, we're going in a little bit of a different direction here. We're going to look at uncertainty reduction theory and how group communication became my way of living. So David, if you'd like to take it away, we can't wait to hear you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Simon. And so, yeah, like Dr. Simon said, mine was on uncertainty reduction theory, more specifically, how the application of the theory, uncertainty reduction theory, applies into group communication and how that kind of became my way of living. And so I don't have a presentation, but I can just mainly talk about it and then my experience with writing the essay and everything like that. So first off, uncertainty reduction theory is defined by William B. Goody. I think I butchered his last name, but he defined the theory as a theory that was developed to explain about initial responses between two strangers. I kind of took that as reducing and decreasing uncertainty among people that you first meet. And within this theory, William, he was going into different theories and then mentioned 8 axioms and 3 methods. The 8 axioms being interrelations among uncertainty, amount of communication, nonverbal affiliative expressiveness, information seeking, reciprocity, similarity, and liking. The methods was a passive strategy, an active strategy, and interactive strategy. Now, in the essay, I first went over an example of how that applied into a movie, and then I went into my own personal experiences. I used the movie Hitch, and if any of y'all never watched Hitch, Hitch is basically about this dating coach that is trying to help a bunch of these people, but then he ends up falling in love himself by using his own advice. So to kind of paint a picture, Hitch is the main character. He's played by Will Smith, and then there's Sarah that he's trying to talk to. Hitch is in the bar, and he notices Sarah, so he was about to come up to her, but then he uses passive strategy, which is just sitting there trying to collect information and figuring out why exactly she's just there. Active strategy is when he tries to go over there, but then someone else cuts him off, and he's just kind of overhearing the conversation there, but not interacting. Then you go into interactive, and that's when he's actually talking to her and doing everything to try to get to know her. Those are the 3 methods. But the axioms and how that relates into group communication, it's everywhere in group communication. So when you're in a group and you're talking with 5 or 6 people, you kind of just talk. But with this essay, I was really trying to break down the group communication and see exactly what's happening and study the communication. So with the first one, interrelations among uncertainty, that's basically being uncertain, that's the initial response when you meet someone that's a stranger and you're confused, you're scared, you're anxious, you don't really know how to go about it. When I go into group communications and group work, I get extremely anxious, I get extremely scared, and I don't know who I'm talking to and what might happen. That's when the amount of communication, that second axiom, comes into play. You're choosing how much communication you want to talk to these people. You decide whether or not you want to be on surface level or you want to go really deeper in. That is also connected into nonverbal affiliative expressiveness. It's basically a really fancy word for body language. And it's just kind of like how you open your arms when you're really open with someone, or you close your arms to show that you're not too comfortable right there. Then you go into the last 4, which is information seeking, reciprocity, similarity, and liking. Those all go hand in hand because it's just really trying to collect data on the people around you. It sounds a little creepy, but that's really what you're doing. You're meeting these people for the first time and you're trying to reduce the uncertainty among those people. You're trying to figure out whether or not they're good people or they're bad people, if they're mean, nice, different things like that. So it's like trying to find similarities within you and the stranger, things you might like about them, maybe things that you see that's coming off as like, oh, maybe this person's similar to who I am, and just trying to find that. So then I just go into the rest of the essay, basically my experience and how that kind of relates to me as an individual. So I am not only with Dr. Simon, but I am also a peer academic leader. And basically, if you don't know what that is, I'm a TA, coach, mentor for a first year course along with an instructor. And within that, I talk to first year students all the time. I'm helping teach the class, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what they're going through. We help teach. It's basically kind of like a UNCG 101 course. And so with this theory specifically, I'm in a group the entire time. I'm speaking in front of them. I'm trying to get them to talk to each other, and I'm trying to reduce the uncertainty because as we all know, being a first year student, it comes with a lot of anxiety. It comes with a lot of stress. And sometimes you're just really, really scared. So my job is to come in there and be that person that is experienced, that understands that situation, and be the student perspective for them. So for an example, you're going into a class for the very first time. That uncertainty that you don't know what's going to be going on is extremely high. That's mixed in with the anxiety, with the fear, with the just, you don't know, the unknown. So with this theory, it comes with those different axioms. Specifically, with every class that we do, I'm always trying to do an icebreaker. I'm trying to get just them to feel more comfortable with each other, trying to talk to each other, and different things like that. So when you put your eyes into the perspective of a first year student, you don't know how much communication you want to tell them. You don't know whether or not you're going to be okay with them, or if these people are going to be nice to you, or they're just going to be mean to you. Within that, different icebreakers, they're trying to find different information. So for example, an icebreaker that we usually do pretty often is 2 truths, 1 lie. You tell 3 different phrases, and one of them is a lie while the other are true about yourself. That's a good way of figuring out whether or not these people are good for you, finding information, finding things that are similar to you in a way, and just trying to get to know everybody. That's extremely, extremely scary. That information seeking is happening throughout the entire class, the entire year, the entire time that you are in there, and you're just trying to make some friends. I use that specifically because it's just a really good example. And this could be put into any other examples when you're talking about group communication, talking to others, maybe having a group project, or with your family. That's a group. That's why I named this essay, How Group Communication Became My Way of Living, because every time I'm in a group, I'm always thinking about those axioms, those different methods, whether or not I'm going to be passive today and just hear, or be interactive and actually talk to these people. It became just my everyday, and it's something that I always think about, see how people interact. It reminds me to be empathetic. It reminds me to be open-minded. And that's why I was so passionate about writing this in the essay, and specifically defining all the axioms and the methods and then putting it into my own experience, because I know that that's extremely scary. So that was basically my uncertainty reduction theory and how group communication became my way of living. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Great work. I loved watching you develop this throughout the semester, and I loved watching you put it together. Everyone, David has a Spanish test later today, so let's give him lots of love and good luck for you, okay? Go get him. All right. I muted myself, sorry. Our next speaker is going to be Kyla, and Kyla did her paper on technology and communication, relationship maintenance in the digital age. So Kyla, take it away for us.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much to Dr. Simon for the introduction, and to Graciela and David for your wonderful research. My name is Kayla Jystad. I use she, her pronouns, and I did mine on technology and communication. This is particularly interesting to me because I focused on my own personal relationship. My fiance and I have been dating for almost 4 years now, and the entirety of that time was long distance. We used to be 4 hours away from each other, and since moving to college, we're now only 1 hour away from each other. This became even more prominent when we were all forced into exclusively technological communication during COVID. So it's been really interesting to see how this research plays out as the digital age gets bigger and bigger. So I will share my screen with everyone. Okay, so first off, in this presentation, we're going to be talking about an overview of the theories that I used, and then we'll move into verbal communication as a foundation for intimacy, over the over technological interaction. We'll be talking about technology and the dialectic tensions, and we'll also be talking about ambiguity and establishing trust over the internet in terms of relationship formation and maintenance. So to start us off, we're going to talk about symbolic interactionism first. So symbolic interactionism is a communication theory that means that people actively engage in these role taking to create symbols that make up our interactions. So the symbols for me might be different, have different meanings than symbols for other people. And this formation of the concepts that inform our relationships really allow us to establish these connections. Relational dialectic theory operates on three central tensions: autonomy versus connection, openness versus protection, and novelty versus predictability. This is more about relationship maintenance than formation, because we're talking about these tensions fluctuating over time, getting more important or less important as it goes on. And I also want to talk about something that was introduced in 2012 by Catherine Hartline. These are the 7 A's. They're technological vulnerabilities that actually affect the relational ecological system as technology is introduced into relationships. I personally am going to be focusing on ambiguity, but these are the 7 tensions that we actually find start to pop up when we introduce technology as a main form of communication. So to start us off, communication as a foundation for intimacy. When our personal self-concept influences our relational concept. So your self-concept and your knowledge that you bring into a relationship really, really helps inform how that communication happens. And this is a little tricky over technology, right? We don't have physical interaction, at least to start off. You don't have these different situations that we would be in if we were in a physical connection with someone. Sometimes you don't even see a person's face. However, while this can be tricky for intimacy, it also broadens our shared experiences through technology, texting, gaming, video calling. We can find out different ways and share experiences that we might not have been able to with people that are thousands or hundreds of miles away. So these diverse connections can actually help establish intimacy. And in my personal relationship, video calling was a way for us to establish intimacy while not seeing each other. 4 hours is a really long drive, and having that connection really helped us establish a strong, trusting foundation for a romantic relationship. And in Heartline, she actually talks about how the internet can approximate face-to-face situations, and we can figure out verbal cues within face-to-face interactions through our computer. So it's really interesting with the rise of Zoom calling, video calling, that approximation of face-to-face interaction can help us establish intimate and deep connections with people that are nowhere near where we are physically. And this can also make it easier if we ever do transition into a physical relationship with this person. It can really help us understand where this person is coming from and reduce the uncertainty that goes into having this connection with someone in a physical sense. The next part I want to talk about is technology and the dialectic tensions. So the most pronounced tension in long distance relationships is this autonomy versus connection tension. So autonomy is a person's independence, our need for being our own person, but we also want to establish connection with someone. This can be a really tricky thing in long distance relationships because you have your own complete life away from these technological interactions with someone, but that connection can be easier or harder to establish. You have to work around these tensions, and this one becomes the most pronounced one. Our worldview, as defined by Luckman, as you can see on the PowerPoint here, also exacerbates these tensions. Our subjective reality as a person can make it maybe easier for myself to establish connection and easier for a partner or a friend to establish another tension. Openness versus protection can also be really tricky. Disclosure has to be gradual and significant in order to establish this intimacy and even verify someone's identity. Our daily lives are like rapidly changing, and if you're not texting, calling on a regular basis, this can be hard to establish intimacy. And it also can put people in really dangerous situations, which we'll talk about in the next part of the presentation. So ambiguity and establishing trust over the internet. It takes a certain amount of innate trust to put yourself out there and share information with people over the internet. The rise of technology means it's easier for people to fake or change things about their identity, and you might not know who you're talking to. You have no way to verify that these pictures that people are sharing are fake or not fake. Now, my relationship started with meeting my fiance in an actual physical proximity, so I could verify that. But in a lot of ways, that's not necessarily the case. This adherence to social norms, as Heartline delineates here, is not necessarily something that we do. We don't necessarily have to say good morning. We don't necessarily have to greet someone. The confluence of texting in our communication is really, really interesting in terms of breaking down these expected social norms in communication. And this openness versus protection has to be balanced towards openness in order to establish trust with a person. In my personal experience, Josh and I were constantly sharing stories. We were constantly video calling, sharing pictures, showing things about our identity that might have been necessarily dangerous if I had no idea who this person was. And that created a deeper form of intimacy once we verified that this is a person that we could trust. When the openness is gradual and pretty significant, you actually end up with more protection and more trust in that relationship. Where if you just like dumped something on someone and they didn't give you any information, didn't give you pictures, had no way of verifying their identity, that would be an infringement on this tension. And in closing, basically long distance relationships, any friendships, romantic relationships, anything that you do that relies on technology requires more innate trust than face-to-face relationships to maintain intimacy. These are times where you can like send a text on social media and you can get 50 new friends. But they might not be close relationships. You have to trust a lot more in order and offer up more information of yourself and trust that you're going to get that back. And this has really drastically affected communication. So thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you. I love throughout the semester, we talked about this, it built up and we had lots of examples. So thank you for sharing this with us. You're doing a great job and I can't wait to see where you take this. Our next presenter is Ariana, and Ariana's title for her paper is How Interpersonal Relationships Develop Online. So these kind of fit into each other.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd also like to thank Dr. Simon for helping us get our presentations ready, as well as thank my fellow panelists. You guys have had some amazing research. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, not able to share.
Do you want to send it to me real quick and I can try to share it?
Yeah, I guess, or you know what, I can go through it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can go through as my computer preferences. All right, well, as Dr. Simon explained, my research had to do with developing deeper connections online. This felt like really important research because since the pandemic, we've had to switch a lot of our day-to-day lives into an online virtual setting. So it just felt important to apply the research that we already know in interpersonal relationships in the real world in face-to-face communication and applying that to a virtual setting. So I decided to look at social penetration theory. It is a theory originally created by Irwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor. They are communication scholars. Their main point was that closeness in relationships can be achieved gradually over time through mutual self-disclosure of our personalities. And so they created a personality structure that is structured like an onion. So if you can think of an onion, it has layers, obviously. And so when we first meet someone, we would start at the outer layers of that onion by sharing our age, maybe your college major, what you do for work, what your hometown is, just really basic biographical information about who you are. As you get to know someone and as you sort of start to share a little bit more about yourself, you start to get at the middle layers of your personality onion. And so that would include your political beliefs, maybe what you like to do for fun, for leisure, maybe your musical taste, just you get a little bit more personal with those middle layers. And eventually, if you continue on that path of sharing information with each other, you would eventually get to the center layers of your onion, which would include your closely held beliefs, values, your sense of self, maybe your self-esteem. That's where you would get really vulnerable with who you are with each other. And so I decided to apply this to a social media competition reality show. It's called The Circle. It's on Netflix if anyone's interested in it. But I decided to study this because the contestants only are able to communicate through this like social platform that is created specifically for the show. And they don't have any interactions with each other outside of that social platform. So they really have to figure out how to create relationships through online communication. The point of the show is to become the most popular, and there is a cash prize of $100,000 at the end of the show. So basically they have to create relationships and do whatever it takes to get people to like them above everyone else. And there were 3 relationships in the show that really developed more than any other relationships. The first one is between Joey and Shubham. Their friendship had a slow start. Like a lot of the other people in the show, though, they sort of started just sharing things about themselves, like where they're from, what they do for work, school. I think one of them was a student, so he shared that. And yeah, their friendship really had a slow start, but eventually they bonded over their shared family values, and that's where they really got vulnerable with each other. Joey is a self-proclaimed mama's boy, so he really appreciates his mom more than anything, but family in general is just really important to him. And Shubham eventually shares that he lives in LA and his parents live in San Francisco, so he makes that 4-hour drive to see them every other weekend. And so that really resonated with Joey, and that was sort of a turning point in their relationship that really made them bond and trust each other. So at that point, they created an alliance. They began to speak on other values like trust and honesty as far as who they could trust and be honest with in the game. And so that really helped build their relationship even further. At the end of the show, they ultimately decided that they would really enjoy continuing to be friends in the real world because they felt that they really knew each other and that they were, someone that they could be friends with. The next relationship I'll be looking at is Joey and Sammy. So this relationship started off with Joey being interested in Sammy more romantically. And she was kind of just interested in him as a friend, but they also had a sort of slow start to their relationship, and they really had a turning point when Sammy revealed that she was really passionate about her work with kids. She is a behavioral therapist, and so she works with a lot of kids that she said have either autism or ADHD, I believe. And so she was really passionate about those kids, and she was talking about specifically how she doesn't tolerate bullying because there was some suspected bullying going on in the show. And so that really resonated with Joey. He had like a newfound respect for her. And they ultimately kind of both came to the decision that they would rather be just allied with each other, and they felt that they could really trust each other. And so similar to with Joey and Shubham, they began to have discussions over trust and honesty as far as who they could trust in the game. And so they really continued to build their friendship off of their shared values of respect and trust and honesty. And so at the end of the show, they also said that they would like to continue to be friends again, because they felt that they really knew who each other really were. The last relationship I looked at was between Shubham and Seaburn. He actually was a catfish, and he played the game as his girlfriend, Rebecca. They were a little bit different than the other two relationships in that they bonded really quickly at the beginning of the game. That was because they were both rated very low the first time that the players rated each other for popularity. They were both rated really low, and so they were both feeling down about that, and they bonded over how down they felt and how they felt they were being really honest, and so that they were disappointed that their real selves wasn't coming across to the other players. That wasn't true for the catfish, but it was true for Shubham, and he felt that he could really trust Seaburn because he felt that he was being really vulnerable and honest with who she was, because he knew her as Rebecca. So they very quickly decided that they had each other's back throughout the whole game because they trusted each other. And their following conversations throughout the game didn't really get any deeper than that initial conversation. So their relationship didn't really change after that. They both had each other's back, but their relationship didn't become as deep as Joey and Sammy or Joey and Shubham. Because they weren't sharing any more information about themselves. So they weren't getting any closer. They weren't revealing any more information that they did with that first conversation. But at the end of the show, they obviously met each other, and Shubham realized that Rebecca wasn't Rebecca. She was actually Seaburn. And Seaburn admitted that, he was using a fake profile, but the conversations that they were having were real and that they were his real personality. And so for that reason, he felt that he would still want to be friends with Shubham. And Shubham said, well, if that is your real personality, then I'm okay with not having known, your real face, because your personality is who you say it is. So they agreed that they would also be friends at the end of the show. Basically in researching this show, I found that online relationships can develop in the same way as in-person relationships do. We just have to be willing to be vulnerable and share parts of ourselves gradually. It obviously doesn't happen all at once. If it does happen all at once, you risk that you don't really learn other parts of someone. So that really slow, gradual revealing of your personality, starting at the outside of your personality and moving further in slowly, it really helps create really deep, meaningful relationships. I also learned that online relationships can occur much faster than real world relationships. The taping of the show happens over 2 to 3 weeks. So it's very quickly for these people to say that they really do want to be close friends after the show and they want to stay in touch, and that they really do trust each other and appreciate each other in just 2 to 3 weeks. That's not always the case in person. Sometimes it could take a lot longer than just 2 to 3 weeks to really feel like you've gotten to know someone. So it obviously can occur a lot faster. And I feel that this information, this research was important as we continue to live and work in online settings, either for leisure or for work or for school, whatever it is. I think it's important to know how relationships develop in the real world in order for you to be able to apply that information in an online or a virtual setting. So I hope you guys were able to take something useful from that. Just kind of disappointed that you couldn't see my PowerPoint, but hopefully it'll be of use to you. And thanks again for joining us.
Good job. Thank you, Ariana. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And I'm so glad that you are getting to use your degree and you're gainfully employed. All of these things make me super happy. So thank you so much. All right, our last presenter, right? This is I'm not missing anybody, I don't think. Our last presenter is Rachel Fox. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because it's what I studied when I was an undergraduate, and I loved reading this paper. This paper is entitled Making Space for Women in Politics. So take it away, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Simon for inviting me to be here today and for being here every step of the way. I appreciate her so much. She is a stellar lady. So thanks to her, thanks to everybody else who's been a part of the panel. It's been great to hear all of your research. It's so interesting. And for everyone who could be here to listen to us, thank you. So the speech I prepared today is called Making a Space for Women in Politics. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. According to UN Women, as of September 1st, 2021, there are 26 women serving as heads of state and/or government in 24 countries. At the current rate, gender equality in the highest positions of power will not be reached for another 130 years. In the world of politics, women often must fight hard to make their voices and their viewpoints heard and to be seen as knowledgeable, level-headed individuals that are capable of holding office. Women in the United States political sphere have to work harder, be smarter, and have more qualifications than their male counterparts just to be considered, and are often still picked apart for how well they perform in quote-unquote masculine or feminine departments. In this speech, I will be defining and reviewing a concept called the muted group theory, created by Edwin and Shirley Ardner. I will also be bringing forth several examples of female politicians and the unique circumstances that they deal with in terms of navigating the world of politics while also belonging to a marginalized group. I will conclude by analyzing these examples through the lens of the muted group theory and offering some reasons as to why women in politics are thrust into these particular circumstances. First, I'm going to define and discuss the muted group theory. The muted group theory essentially recognizes, focuses on, and studies marginalized groups throughout history and within modern society. These are people whose voices are not typically heard, are ignored, and do not have as many opportunities in society as those who hold the power. It is important to remember, however, that even members of muted groups do not completely lack a voice. It is simply muted. According to Cheris Krameray, who further studied the muted group theory after its creation, women and members of other subordinate groups are not as free or as able as men are to say what they wish, when and where they wish, because the words and the norms for their use have been formulated by the dominant group, men. Essentially, society is created and maintained through the perception of the male gender because they are the ones in charge. A woman's perception is not conducive to or often portrayed in society. A clear-cut example of one of the reasons why women are considered to be a muted group is the idea of male stream expression, or traditional mass media that is controlled by men. One example of this would include the existence of the Raphaelite Brotherhood. It's in the name. No women were ever officially recognized as members of the Brotherhood, although female artists like Christina Rossetti and many others contributed just as much to the society as the male members did. Next, I will be bringing some different examples forward of women working within the political sphere and how they have been treated with disregard throughout their careers. In their article, Women in Politics, The Privacy Without Necktie, Lopez, Hermida, and Diaz study the presidency of Michelle Bachelet, the first female president of Chile. Specifically, they study how the media reacted to Bachelet's election, what they chose to report on throughout her presidency, and what kind of light they painted her in. By studying these things, they can glean some of what the public expects from a woman in politics and how they are viewed in comparison to their male counterparts. Lopez says that there are certain subject areas in which male candidates are viewed more comfortably, while other topics are easily identified with female candidates. This introduces the idea that both men and women are framed in a certain way, but evidence shows that even though both of these genders face stereotypes, it is women that are often portrayed as the weaker sex. Women are seen as being better in categories like education, civil rights, family, environmental issues, etc. The only reason that women are seen as excelling in these political categories is that they are also viewed as having qualities such as, quote, dependence, weak leadership, highly emotional, compassionate, and loving. Even when a woman who holds office as every part of her life is displayed by the media, they are still seen as only having characteristics typical of a woman, rather than the person that they are and have demonstrated themselves to be. In the United States, women who have run for office have faced slander campaigns by the media, are held to impossibly high standards, and face judgment from the general public directed by the media. Women who were more than qualified for the positions that they ran for, such as Hillary Clinton, faced wide-scale ridicule by the general public and the media alike when she ran for presidency. While running for office in 2016, media outlets that were guiding the general public's opinion of her chose to almost obsess over their hatred for her. According to an article from Vox with a V, Fox News showed her face on their network 6 times more than CNN. Not only did they ridicule her actions in office, but they consistently mocked her character and her appearance. Another poignant example of the clear bias that many hold concerning women in politics is a series of events concerning New Zealand Premier Jacinda Ardern and male politician Tony Blair. In the mediated communication of gender and sexuality in contemporary politics, Smith discusses how when Jacinda Ardern gave birth to her daughter, she began to use motherhood as a way to implement a more compassionate way of politicking. In response, she was met with much backlash from the media and was painted in a very negative light. However, when the male Tony Blair used his fatherhood status to implement paternity leave reforms, he was hailed as a stellar father and was painted in a positive light by the media. The muted group theory can be applied to the subject of women in politics and can be used to answer the question, why is it so hard for women to break into the world of politics, and why do they face so much stigma and criticism when they finally do so? In particular, the idea of the male stream expression can be applied to almost every specific instance of a woman facing adversity within the world of politics that I've mentioned so far. Since the dominant perception in society is that of the male gaze, this means that the male gaze permeates into every aspect of society, including mass media. News publications like Fox News that obsess over Hillary Clinton and stoop to mocking her appearance or name calling are only reinforcing these patriarchal ideas that women are weak and not fit to hold office. If women are a muted group, then women in politics are at once the most muted of women and the women whose voices are heard more than any other. Even though they are constantly facing adversity and slander, and many women in politics are seen in a bad light due to the constant slander that they face, they are still at the front of the lines and fighting for women's voices to be heard. They are fighting for future women so that they might have an easier time breaking into politics, so that they might be judged by their actions in office rather than their marriage or how many children they have. Right now, when a woman succeeds in politics, it is not a testament to her skill that she is seen as being good at these things, but rather her perceived personality traits that are gleaned from stereotypical viewpoints. The reason why women are seen as unequal and unfit to work within the world of politics is simply because of their gender. It's simply because of who we are. We live in a mostly patriarchal world where men's viewpoints and opinions are facts and law, and women are often reduced to nothing but their stereotypes. This is especially true for women like Jacinda Ardern, who was criticized and slandered for choosing to lead in a way that reflected feminine qualities and the female gaze. According to the muted group theory and Kramer, men have created our language and therefore created the framework for our entire society. Society operates through the male gaze. Therefore, the stereotypes and characteristics that women have been named for were also created through the male gaze. Somehow, women in politics who display these stereotypes that were created by men in the first place are demonized for them. When a woman in the world of politics, like Jacinda Ardern, shows compassion, she's seen as weak. When a man shows the same qualities, he's seen as strong. The entire world is framed so that when women are displayed to the world as kind and loving by the media, she's weak. But when she's displayed to the world as logical and practical, she's cold and unfeeling. Moving forward, it is not so much about having a conversation that asks, how do we make space for women in politics? But more so about asking, how do we reframe politically driven environments to hold a space for both men and women? Because to change the way that patriarchal societies as a whole view and facilitate the treatment of women, we have to start with the mainframe on the inside. Thank you.
Good job, Rachel. Good job. I love it. I'm so proud of each and every one of you. Thank you for everything, all the work you put into it, coming in and doing this presentation. We practiced before this, we worked hard on it, and these students are just amazing. And it just shows that, it's the kind of thing that we want to see. And I know good things are happening for you guys. So I'm so happy you did this. And Rachel, as you were talking, your particular paper shows, so it's coming into focus right now as we watch these Supreme Court Justice hearings, and we saw this with the Kavanaugh hearing as well. It's not really the women who are emotional in these. I thought women were emotional, but we are seeing men use emotion, but in very different ways. Or at least what they feel are different ways. And you're right, the mainframe allows them to do that. So I'm excited. And I think that's one way you can continue to work on this topic as you look at how men use their emotion in public as well. So excellent work. At this point in time, I want to open it up to the audience. If there are any questions, you can ask any one of our speakers to clarify some things, to expand on some things. They are ready for your questions. If we don't have any, how about I throw this one out to our group? And David has left us to go take a test, but I want to hear how you all think you can tie this into other things that you might be studying, or for our one student who has graduated, how you might use these theories in your everyday lives, how you see these things happening in either your studies or in your everyday life, your work life, things like that.
I can answer this first. So prior to last semester, when I did take CST 300, I was not a women's gender and sexuality studies minor, but I had taken a lot of courses that were related to that subject, just for elective purposes. And I chose to pick up that minor because I needed to have a minor in order to finish my degree at UNCG. And I realized that I had a lot of other work that I had already, started and like really been thinking about and pondering prior to that semester. So I've been kind of studying and examining the themes of, women in general and, in the media and in the workplace and things like that. For as long as I've been a student at UNCG, I took my first gender studies class when I was a freshman in my first semester. So I'm going to continue to try to examine this further and potentially do like a broader scale of research and that kind of thing. If I have the opportunity to do so, to kind of see maybe if there are other ages of women that are affected as adversely as young women are, and that kind of thing, and then try to, further expand my research in that way.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I obviously am very, very interested in gender studies and communication studies relating to women's studies, etc. So really, for me, I just want to take it as far as I can take it and just get so specifically intense with the focus on it. I'm so interested in all the nuances and just thousands of different topics and theories and subjects you can study relating to how women have to deal with our position in society. It's just so incredibly thorough and interesting to me. I just want to keep going with it forever.
You go, girl. So one of the places I might send you to is the same place that Grazi went to, is women and gender studies. But also when I was an undergrad, I had to sort of meld things in kind of the same way that you are doing. I melded it in between political science, communication studies, and women and gender studies. And that can make kind of a nice body of research. And there's always graduate school. All of you can go to graduate school. So keep that in mind as well. All right. Yep. You absolutely. Thank you, Chrissy, for coming. All right. Anybody else want to expand on that or have questions?
I can answer your question too. So for me, I'm going to be starting at my new job next week. And it's going to be mostly online because most of the team is still working remotely. Some of them aren't even in the state. So I mean, it is going to be interesting to see how we all kind of start working together and developing professionally as a team, being that we're still very much online. I think, I'm definitely going to have to use a little social penetration theory and just be willing to like share about myself, and hopefully they're willing to share about them as well. So we can really create like a good working relationship.
Awesome. Anybody else want to join in?
I can go.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm actually going into elementary education after I graduate. So the like integration of technology into like developing like people who are developing communication skills from just like existing is really, really interesting. And Ariana, I think that your presentation was particularly interesting for me because social penetration is so important for establishing these connections online. These kids that are doing distance learning in kindergarten, and these teachers who have to figure out how to get concepts to stick, do interactive activities with 5-year-olds online is really, really, it's really interesting to see how, I hope this research can continue as to see like how this affects just communication in general for, people developing, people learning new languages, people learning new social norms. I think it's really interesting. And like Ariana said, I think it's really important, especially in a digital age like we have today.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Are there any other questions that we would like to ask our panelists today?
I think we had a question in the chat. What were our primary sources?
Oh, I didn't see that one in the chat. Do you guys want to share that?
I can go ahead. My primary source was definitely the textbook. I actually did not cite it in my paper for some reason, so I cannot remember the title, but the textbook we had for the class, and then I actually used the UNCG database to get a couple of scholarly articles that I felt like had specific examples that related to my topic, and also went kind of more in detail than like a CNN article or something, you know, just a little bit more academically discussed.
Yeah, I will fill in on how the assignment parses out. The course is designed to help students. It's the first course where they really have to implement primary source materials. And so we go through a workshop in the library on how to find primary sources, and they use our database to look up academic peer-reviewed articles on their topics. Yeah, so it looks, who's raising their hand? Somebody's raising their hand.
I am.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that my primary sources were, yes, the things that I found in the database and then the textbook as well. But my particular primary source was the research that I did outside of that with the survey results. Yeah, and that was, you know, I felt my most relevant primary source, just because it was specifically from the opinions of young women, you know, being shared.
Very good. And I think we have one more hand. Kayla, you want to chat a bit?
Yeah, my major primary source was obviously the textbook, and also Catherine Hartland's Digital Dwelling, Technology and Couple and Family Relationships in the Family Relationships Journal. It's really, really interesting. You can find it on JSTOR. It's a great read. If anyone wants it, I can give it to you because I thought it was really interesting.
Thank you all. Any other questions? All right, well, Dr. Bolte, I am not going to wrap us up here if you don't mind, and say thank you to all of our panelists, to all of those who joined us today. Thank you so much for supporting these students and being here for their presentations. And we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.